Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, what was life like for the average citizen living in Imperial Japan? This video is sponsored by Skillshare. More on that later. For our story, we will follow the journey of two average citizens living under the rule of the Japanese Empire. One of these citizens is ethnically Japanese, and the other is Han Chinese, born in the imperial territory of Taiwan. This will allow us to experience two different perspectives of life in Imperial Japan. If you guys like this format, we can replicate it for future videos in this series. Before delving into everyday life, we should first explore the origins of militarism and authoritarianism that would come to define it. A good place to start is 1868, when the old feudal system, known as the shogunate, was replaced with a strong centralized government, which sought to achieve direct control over its population. This came to be known as the Meiji Restoration, a critical moment in Japan's history, as the new imperial government embraced Western technology and bureaucracy, which stood in stark contrast to the isolationist shogunate that had existed for centuries prior. With a new internationalist foreign policy came an active hand in global affairs, which resulted in several wars and expeditions, significantly expanding the reach of the Japanese state. As the economy shifted and the war machine needed to be fueled, there were massive repercussions for the common imperial subject. The year is 1923, and for our Japanese individual, Isamu, life could have begun in a rural area outside of Tokyo. His family had been farmers for hundreds of years, but in the generations since the Meiji Restoration, they have since transitioned to textile manufacturing, even opening up their own workshop. This is something that Isamu's family takes particular pride in, and indeed so does the whole of the empire, for modernization happened so rapidly that agriculture now accounts for less than 20% of the national GDP. In pre-Meiji Japan, almost the entire society was agrarian-based. Meanwhile, life for our Taiwanese subject, Su Yin, is a different matter. Unlike Isamu, Su Yin and her family still work in agriculture, not for themselves however, but to sustain the working population of Japan's home islands. And while Su Yin's family lives under Japan and faces a degree of discrimination, they have shown rapid adaptation to the Japanese regime. Forceful assimilation has been something the imperial government has implemented in recent years. Their strategy? Changing Taiwanese Chinese names to Japanese, promoting the Japanese language, and finally drafting the Taiwanese population into the imperial army. By 1930, Isamu is 12 and is just starting his secondary education. The Japanese schooling system at this time is structured so that it teaches the traditional honor code of Bushido, which included strict loyalty to the state. Su Yin, now also 12, has already finished school. Her education was different than Isamu's, both because of her ethnicity and her gender. Because Su Yin was Taiwanese, her education was focused on breaking down her Han Chinese ethnic identity and reconstructing her as a loyal Japanese subject. For that reason, only primary education was mandatory, which focused heavily on literacy, but also on familiarity with Japanese culture and customs. Universal education, especially of girls, was something relatively limited in Japan and its territories. Legal equality would not be fully realized until 1945 in Japan under a new post-war constitution, and in Taiwan in 1946 under the Republican Chinese government. One important aspect of Japanese culture is faith, namely Shintoism, and by this time, state Shintoism. The Japanese government has taken massive steps since the Meiji Restoration to not only oversee religion in its empire, but conflate it with ultra-nationalism. Isamu's family is traditional and they take their faith seriously. Because of the newly implemented state Shintoism, they now look down on foreign religions such as Taoism and Christianity. Not only that, but they view their emperor, Hirohito, as a deity, descending from the Japanese sun god Amaterasu. Because Isamu and much of the Japanese population accept Hirohito to be a direct successor of the sun god, they believe this gives him a divine right to rule over both Japan and the world. In Taiwan, Suyin practices Taiwanese Buddhism, which is one of the few tolerated religions in Imperial Japan. In fact, Japanese Buddhists work with those in Taiwan frequently, but because of how different Japanese Buddhism is from Taiwanese Buddhism, there hasn't been much cooperation. As for future hopes and aspirations, Isamu is looking forward to graduating high school. Unlike what happened in previous generations, he won't be able to freely choose his wife. Instead, his father will find a wife for him shortly after he becomes an adult, a tradition known as miai or omiai. She'll have to be of pure Japanese blood, as his father would never choose a half-Korean or someone of the lower classes. In the meantime, Isamu is on track to taking on more responsibilities in the home-based factory. He plans on eventually taking over once his father decides to retire. Suyin, on the other hand, now goes into a period of unofficial training to become a wife and a mother. Once she is old enough, she will be given to a husband and expected to take care of the household. Her main concern is not if she'll like her husband, but whether or not she'll be able to bear children. If she fails to do so, she may have to return to her parents' home and live there. But as war approaches, our characters may not go down the path they plan for. By the time they are 18 years old in 1936, both Isamu and Suyin find themselves drawn increasingly to supporting the Imperial Armed Forces. Both will have different ways to support the troops, both will have different reasons for doing so, and both will have very different experiences in the field. But that's a tale for another time. Now on to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the ultimate online self-improvement tool, offering users thousands of classes in all sorts of subjects, ranging from writing to business to video editing and much more. Skillshare helped me out tremendously during the early stages of my YouTube channel and continues to help me out to this day. Of the classes I've taken so far, Matt Balak's about growing your YouTube channel stands out in particular. It details just how one should go about creating a mission statement, doing keyword research, making thumbnails, playlists, annotations, and doing collaborations. If you've noticed a change in our thumbnail design recently, that is precisely because of Balak's class on Skillshare. If you sign up for the premium membership, you will gain access to the full selection of over 10,000 classes today. Whatever you want to learn about, you can do it here. The first 500 of you to use my promo link in the description down below will get their first 2 months for free, which is plenty of time to at least get the basics down of any new skill you want to learn. And after that, it's less than $10 a month, making Skillshare one of the most affordable learning services out there. I can only recommend you check it out and see for yourself.